I found that some of my biggest breakthroughs in LSAT logical reasoning came when I stopped thinking about LSAT question type. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, back when I was studying for the LSAT, I found myself getting bogged down with those 500-page LSAT prep phone books that overcomplicated everything with the 15 different types of logical reasoning questions, the 4 different types of reading comp passages, the 12 different types of LSAT reading comp question types. And I found that for logical reasoning specifically, I was able to throw out the categorizations and instead focus on the method of reasoning in the stimulus. Because it turns out if you actually understand what the argument is saying, the question becomes a whole lot easier. Surprise, surprise. If you focus on the cheap tricks, you're not going to do that well beyond a certain point because the LSAT is just too smart for that. Maybe those cheap tricks will get you into the 150s, maybe into the low 160s, but certainly not into the high 160s, 170s, and beyond. You got to understand what the argument is actually asking you for. What's the evidence? What's the conclusion? What's the gap between the two? What's the underlying method of reasoning? What are the unstated assumptions, the premises inherent within the argument? If it's a fact set, what connections can you make between different parts of the argument to yield an inference? What is explicitly prohibited by that fact set or by that argument? And so it turns out that if you take a given argument, for example, you can easily transform it into a wide variety of LSAT question types. So for example, if you take a stimulus associated with a strengthened question, you could just flip it around and make it into a weakened question. And because this is an argument on the LSAT, it will contain a gap. That gap would be the unstated underlying necessary assumption. If you close all gaps associated with the argument, you can then guarantee the argument by providing a new sufficient assumption. If you accuse the argument of having failed to consider the underlying assumptions, you can then propose that this argument is flawed and turn it into a flaw question, for example. So let's take, for example, an argument saying that we should go to that restaurant conclusion because evidence, it has 5 stars on Yelp. You could strengthen the argument if you say that Yelp reviews are a good indicator of whether a restaurant is worth eating at. You could weaken the argument by saying Yelp reviews are not that indicative of whether one should go to a restaurant. The argument assumes that Yelp reviews are a reliable indicator. You could say the argument is flawed, for example, by suggesting that Yelp reviews are prone to being faked, or that average star rating is not a sufficient indicator because it fails to consider that maybe there is only one review and one review is not a large enough sample upon which to base an average star rating or base recommendation about whether to go to a restaurant or not. So you see, we can manipulate an argument, we can reframe it in a variety of ways to prove our fluency in the argument, to show that we really get what the argument is saying. This reframing technique is one of many that we use at LSAT Unplugged inside our small group coaching program, in our one-on-one coaching program, to help you better understand arguments. It's part of the Socratic review method. And if you're aiming for a 175 or above on the LSAT, I definitely recommend you employ this technique as well as the others that we walk you through in our program. If you're interested in finding out more, you can check out the links below, book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out, because the thing is, reviewing your mistakes is incredibly important. And so for every question you get wrong, for every question you have difficulty with, you've got an opportunity to learn something new. If you didn't understand the argument, you want to try this reframing technique. If you are prone to certain types of tempting wrong answer choices, you want to determine what is tempting about the wrong answer choice that makes you pick it and what ultimately makes it wrong. If you are discouraged or dissuaded from an unappealing right answer choice, what made the choice unappealing on your first attempt and what ultimately makes it correct? You have these traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer choices and traps of discouragement away from the right answer choices. And until you understand exactly which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, you may end up making the same mistake again. And that's what we want to help you avoid. And so for every logical reasoning question you're having trouble with, analyze your misunderstandings. Were they coming from the stimulus? Were they coming from the wording in the question stem? Or were they coming from something in the answer choices? Whatever it is, you want to talk it out, write it out, demo it live in class or in a study group to make sure you truly understand your mistakes so that you will never make that same mistake again. Links below to find out more and to book a call with me, my team. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.